But at the time, it's like this was a real problem that a lot of people had, and it made a real difference in people's lives.
You don't want to let yourself down, and you don't want to fail. You don't want to shut down your company. Like you'll do anything. And sometimes that could be blinding because it may be the best thing to do to shut down your company.
At the end of the day, early stage investing is almost always more betting on the jockey than betting on the horse. Welcome to Money Mavericks, the podcast where we explore the dynamic world of finance, investment, and entrepreneurship.
I'm Kirk Drake.
And I'm Daryl Hicks. Together, we're here to bring you the latest insights, expert opinions from the trailblazers who are redefining success in the financial world. There's that old expression, the bigger the why, the easier the how, right? If your child's caught in a burning house, you're not sitting there creating like a 21-page plan on, which door you're going to go in and which window, and you're just going to go. You're going to go, and you're going to go with everything that you've got, right? What were some of the, and again, I think some people are just born with this risk tolerance, or they're just so inspired or lit up, and they're thinking, it sounds like for you a little bit like, the outcome, hey, if I'm successful, like believing that there's this possibility down there. But where do you think that risk tolerance came from, and what was your why that was pushing you through that risk?
Yeah, I definitely sort of joke about my son. He noticed it very early on, like his brain doesn't seem to produce adrenaline like everybody else's. And, I'm just like cost benefit analysis. Okay. Yes, you probably can make that jump, but what if you don't? What's the benefit? So I do think there is a little bit just sort of born with it kind of risk tolerance to some degree. But to the point you made earlier about being in industry, I have a lot of people ask me, I want to start a business. How should I go about it? I'm like, you should go work in an industry for 10 years and go become like a real expert. And then the problems will become very obvious, right? And you will know where you can solve something. And so when I think about the jump, it didn't feel risky at the time. Now, when I look back at it, in hindsight, I'm like, why on earth did I do that? Like, it's crazy to think that we would start a business like that. I mean, we had enough money this was like September. I think we had enough cash to get to December. And after that, we just got to, eat what we killed. And it was just insane that we made it through. But at the time, it's like, this was a real problem that a lot of people had, and it made a real difference in people's lives. It wasn't about building a business to sell. I wasn't even thinking about trying, like, what would happen if we were successful. We were successful. It's like, let's go solve a problem, a real problem that makes a real difference in people's lives. And then things tend to work out when you're able to do that.
I think that's true. Certainly, that resonates with me when I think about my personal experience. When I have moments of doubt and I'm up against risk, I would think back to does the market need this solution? And I think when you've got that experience, or when you've felt that pain yourself, the pain that you're solving with your product, with your solution, with your service, it's one of the big contributing factors that helps you to push through and say, no, I'm on to something real here. I know that this solves a real problem. I know there's going to be a market here. I know people are going to be willing to pay something for this solution because it's the problem or the pain is so big, right? And it's that old analogy, you want to make more money, go solve bigger problems, and solve the problems at scale.
Yeah, we sell to a lot of human resource directors in K-12 schools. I was sitting down with one the other day, and there's so much stuff going on. There's so much stuff getting thrown at her. There's pulled in all kinds of different directions. And it was interesting. I finally got her to just stop for a second and just sort of set that stuff aside, look at what we were doing. And I saw the body language. It was like her head cocks to the side. She kind of leans over. She's like, "Are you kidding me? This is huge." And I'm like, that's the moment, Daryl. That's the moment when I'm like, we're going to be fine. This is going to work. When you can get this is going to work.
Yeah. Love it. That's awesome. I think there's a lot of value in that lesson there.
On Money Mavericks, we don't just talk about making money. We explore the innovative strategies and bold decisions that drive real change. Whether you're an experienced investor, a budding entrepreneur, or just someone looking to make smarter financial choices, we've got something for you.
Every week, we're going to sit down with industry leaders, visionaries, and mavericks who share their journeys, challenges, and breakthroughs, from contrarian views on market trends to the secrets behind building a successful startup. You get an inside look at what it takes to thrive in today's economy.
And we promise to keep it real, engaging, and most importantly, actionable. No jargon, no fluff. Just straightforward conversations that you can apply to your own financial journey.
So get ready to challenge your thinking, expand your knowledge, and take control of your financial future. This is Money Mavericks,
where we turn financial dreams into realities and mavericks into legends.
I'd love to see how the index performs, actually, Kirk, and see if you're onto something there. You could be, but there's definitely something about, founders who are willing to just push themselves through just about anything. I mean, what's that old quote that it's a Bay Area VC who originally said it? Elon Musk gets credit for it all the time, that entrepreneurship is like eating glass as you stare into the abyss.
Yeah, there you go. It really is.
Every founder knows what that feels like.
Yeah, but no one really talks about it. That's why I like this what you guys are doing here, because we're actually like sharing stories of like the not just the good times of being an entrepreneur. There are many good times, but look, I mean, as entrepreneurs, we commit ourselves for a decade to get wins. It's not incremental. Like, it's literally most of the time we're like crawling through the mud. And we have wins along the way, and those wins are really what keep us going. Going back to this whole topic, right? I my biggest fears I had to confront, and I had to like look at it in the face. And the biggest fear as an entrepreneur is you just don't want to let like people down. That's number one. You don't want to let yourself down, and you don't want to fail. You don't want to shut down your company. Like you'll do anything. And sometimes that could be blinding, because it may be the best thing to do to shut down your company, right? And it could have been that case for me. It ended up working out, and we ended up pivoting to a different idea that was tangential to what we were doing in the past. It was very natural to kind of like pivot from a product perspective and a market perspective. We understood the market, and having Chris and Kirk to guide us in terms of how credit unions think was hugely helpful. But I would say that like I came out the other side a different person, like an evolved.
Yeah, it's fascinating. The theme of the podcast is the Money Mavericks, and one of the things that we've talked a lot about the really important stuff of the emotional and mental fortitude, the integrity, like growing into the ability to have the really tough conversations, call it like it is. Kirk shared a few details. I'm not going to call them out, on some of the things that you had said to him that really caused him to take a step back and say, okay, Sarup is the guy who's going to push this through, and he's not pulling any punches. And I'm sure that this is not an easy conversation for him, what he's calling me up to say, but I appreciate so much the strength and the conviction and the integrity that he's showing in it, that I feel like this is, at the end of the day, early stage investing is almost always more betting on the jockey than betting on the horse, right? So if you've got someone who's, founder product fit, where they've got a lot of experience, expertise, and knowledge, but also that they've got, that they're high integrity and a lot of conviction to what they're doing. That doesn't always work out, but that's certainly, a really important index. But I'd love to kind of unpack a little bit some of the technical stuff, like how do you restructure a business at this point? Is there, like, there's terms out there that not a lot of people are familiar with. I mean, I have some experience with cram downs. I believe that was something that happened in your business. If you wouldn't mind just kind of walking through some of what that was from a technical perspective, but even the conversations that you had to have, and how do you approach those?
Yeah. And look, on the integrity side, look, I mean, again, like, my personality is like, I want to make everybody happy naturally. And at the end of the day, you run into certain instances where you can't make everyone happy. It's just impossible, because there's so many stakeholders involved, and you got to find the right balance that works. And the challenge that I went through and I had to face was like, I saw a path to actually getting to success, but I had to have conversations with all the stakeholders and seek alignment. And there were many stakeholders involved in this process. Going back to like how the restructuring occurred, I probably, like, between like the time where we started getting initial traction with, the 5 credit unions that we got as customers last summer, building the initial product, it was still not possible for me to raise capital. It was just not possible. I remember having like, 150 VC meetings, investor meetings, even with angel investors, a lot of them in the US, Toronto, and like none of them would invest in me because the founders didn't own like much of the company anymore. And that in particular is despite like, a lot of under founders I talked to, getting like good traction from an ARR perspective and a growth perspective, that's a common issue that I see a lot in market. Like you just cannot get funded because you simply aren't incentivized. So that's something that we ran into last year. And the one sort of like moment that like the one thing that I did last summer is I threw in a Y Combinator application, not thinking much about it because it's such a competitive program to get into, threw it in and, I don't know what it was, but we got an interview and we got approved. The contingency on going through YC Winter 24, which started in January 2024, earlier this year, was that we had to restructure the company. Like founders needed to own a majority of the company again. We had to kind of like, reduce the debt to near zero. And, there was just some requirements that seemed impossible at the time, but it was really the only option because, we could have kept the business going with the founders owning what they did, but really from an institutional perspective, it would just not been possible to raise capital. We had to essentially, in order to kind of like satisfy YC's requirements to get in, which would capitalize the business, $500,000 was a lot of money at the time for us in order to see this business through and get to where we are today. But we had to have the tough conversation and with our board and our shareholders on essentially topping up the founders. And by the way, my original co-founder left and, we had to put in place a new co-founder, like our head of engineering stepped up to become our CTO. So that was a painful moment. And
Whoa.
Nick, original co-founder, one of the most stand-up guys I've ever met. And he was just so cooperative throughout the process. He'll always be in my good books and an amazing individual that made an impact in my life. So that was, again, luck, right? Just coming across the right co-founder and just him being very supportive towards the restructuring, but also like the board really understanding and the shareholders understanding that there's two choices, really kind of like shut down the company, write off, or let's like restructure this thing and, run a pay to play in order to really kind of like just see this business to success. And YC was enough of a brand and enough of an anchor for us to really kind of like just actually execute on a restructuring, which was complicated. There was a lot of like nuances there that, we had to financially engineer and like, there was a lot of like, incentives that we had to kind of figure out, but ultimately at the end of the day, we ended up figuring it out. And again, we found like a small hole that everybody was satisfied with that we could kind of like execute on. And we ended up making it happen before the Christmas break. And that Christmas break was like, wow. Like I was just like, resting.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Money Mavericks. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring.
Don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And be sure to share this episode with someone who needs to hear it.
Stay connected with us on social media and visit our website for exclusive resources, episode transcripts, and more.
Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, making smart moves, and turning your financial dreams into realities.
You've been listening to Money Mavericks, where Mavericks become legends.